It's that time of year, time to spring forward an hour. We do it, but do you know why we do it? Who started it?
I'm not even sure anymore when I lose an hour, gain an hour or so.
I thought it had something to do with farming, having more usable daylight.
The farmers, more than any other Americans, hated daylight saving time.
Professor and author Michael Downing knows whereof he speaks. He's written the book Spring Forward, a study of the origins of daylight saving time. And it turns out we've got it wrong about farmers.
From the beginning, they told Congress, roosters can't tell time. They're going to get up with the sunrise.
To find the true origin of this timely tradition, you need to walk the dusty streets of post-Victorian England.
Daylight saving really begins in 1907 with a man on a horse in London. William Willett, an architect, but importantly to this story, a golfer, is riding through London at sunrise, and he notices all of London has its shutters closed. And he thinks, what a terrible waste of a natural resource.
So, eager to have that extra hour of daylight for his golf game, the avid golfer published a proposal.
The British debate it for 10 years. As soon as they go to adopt it, Germany beats them to the punch. It's a sneak attack. The Germans in World War I get daylight saving first, the British are second, and then the Americans in Europe follow.
It turns out Americans didn't take the switch lying down. Hollywood wanted no part of it. Fewer people pile into dark movie theaters if it's still light out. Retailers, on the other hand, loved it. More time to shop after work. Baseball rooted for it too. Fewer games called for darkness, back before the era of big stadium lights. Wall Street's 2 cents? Well, they needed to play catch-up so that they could overlap with the London Exchange, which had already made the switch. Daylight saving time became law in New York City in short order. But the rest of the country was slow to follow suit, and as a result,
there was a bus trip in the Virginia area at one point before we had uniform time, where to go about 35 miles you had to pass through 7 different times.
And it's not just we Americans who were confused by it all.
1930, Joseph Stalin turns all the clocks in the Soviet Union ahead by an hour in April, unfortunately. That October, he forgets to fall backward. Apparently, no one dare tell Stalin that he forgot. 61 years, I'm not making this up. Every clock is off by an hour because of the confusion over daylight saving time.
Here at home, the debate over spring forward, fall back continued until 1966, when the federal government passed the Uniform Time Act to make life easier. Unless, of course, you find yourself riding a train on that October Sunday when the clock falls back an hour. Rather than run the risk of arriving an hour early, Amtrak stops its trains in their tracks.
And you sit on the railroad tracks with your fellow passengers enjoying an hour of going nowhere.
Some frolic in the extra daylight, others fret.
I am devastated. I'm already behind on sleep, and this isn't going to help me one bit.
Though some dread turning the clocks ahead, there's really naught to fear, because that hour of missing sleep just means that spring is here.
Spring has come, at last, to Kansas.
Life is out there and it's active and the plants start to grow and it's warm weather and spring is always the time of new beginning and everything.
Come on, dear, come on. Come on.
Farmer Jim Harris has made it through another long winter, though not without struggle.
Now you have the chance to change things again and to try again.
Springtime gives you that chance, a chance for hope and renewal. But only if you survive the winter.
Works all right, everything's right about. As you can see, it's hardly worn. All right, here we go. We're doing it in the mower. All right.
This past winter was one of the harshest on record for mid-America, and the farmers felt it. For those forced to sell out, this was their winter of discontent. a winter of foreclosures and bankruptcies and failure. In Hutchinson, Kansas, spring takes many forms. It is a time for the annual Gospel Singing Festival.
With this bill, then we'll know what to do with our wheat around this thing.
It is a time for farmers to gather and sort out the problems of winter past.
We couldn't have got anything. We didn't need anything. That's all we needed.
And in Hutchinson streets, it is a time of vitality and rebirth.
Just over a year ago, more than 8% of the workers in the Hutchinson area did not have a job. Since then, so many have gone back to work that the jobless rate is down to about 5%. And for those who are back at work this spring, there is optimism that the economic hard times may be coming to an end.
The biggest employer in Hutchinson is this hydraulics production plant, a division of the Cessna Airplane Company. For 13 weeks last year, all the laborers, more than 1,000 people, were laid off when the plant shut down. Now, production is increasing and more workers are being hired slowly. This was Nola Moore's first day back on the job. She was out of work for 2.5 months.
It was scary.
When you say it was scary, what do you mean?
Well, I had 3 kids, and all of them in school, 2 of them in high school. I was supporting them, and I just didn't know how I was going to make ends meet.
Nola Moore is lucky, but she worries about staying employed. She wishes the economic recovery weren't so faint, so tentative.
I just wish we could kind of get everything to so it wouldn't be going up so high, and then the way everybody wouldn't be trying to get their wages so high to where the employer couldn't pay them.
There are others in Hutchinson who don't even come close to sharing equally in the spring recovery. Black unemployment in the area is more than double white joblessness.
The blacks, they have been very quiet about the whole situation. They felt deprived in lots of areas. But the point, they felt that time would revolutionize and bring them out of this crisis.
Reverend W.C. Tillman has served on Hutchinson's Human Relations Commission.
You don't see any blacks selling cars, or only maybe I think one lot or so. You don't see any blacks in the finance companies, and you don't see any blacks in the banks. You don't see a bookkeeper, you don't see a clerk, you don't see a manager of any sort.
Jim Harris farms 1,000 acres of Kansas land. It cannot be done without a lot of expensive equipment. Harris would like to replace some of it, but the signs of recovery are faint and tentative.
This machine can do for me what I need to do, and so I take care of that machine because I cannot afford the financing, the interest cost, and so forth on a new machine. The investment is very large now. You're talking in tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the economy, the scale is much different. The interest on that money is much greater. The interest alone is significantly different. Interest rates used to be, below 10%. Now they're above 10%.
There isn't any question in my mind that whatever economic recovery we've had in this country, however, has skipped American agriculture, has skipped rural America.
Congressman Dan Glickman, a Democrat, comes home to Kansas on weekends where he often meets with grain farmers, his constituents. They are often angry over the federal government's farm policy.
I think it's a dirty deal and a double cross for the government to come along and reduce that target price from $4.45 to $4.38. Don't you think so?
Well, let's put it like this.
I don't care how you put it.
A century ago, a Kansas politician said this: "What you farmers should do is raise less corn and more hell." They took that advice, and they're still doing it.
When the legislation would have been changed.
I don't give a hoot about legislation. I'm talking about the government breaking its promise to the farmers of America, and you're part of it.
Okay. There is a tenacity to a farmer, a grain farmer, that is unparalleled and unequaled anywhere in this country. They also know that they are a productive force and part of our national security. You talk to a lot of farmers here, and you almost feel as if they're soldiers. They're not working tanks or missiles, but they're working the ground, and they're doing something every bit as important to America as if they were in the Defense Department, or the Army, or the Navy. And I think that that keeps them going, even though the economic side of the picture isn't very good.
A poet said it: "For winter's rains and ruins are over, and in green underwood and cover, blossom by blossom, the spring begins." Nola Moore.
I'm back to work, and I'm making more money, and I can afford to a kid when I was off work. Going back to work just makes everything look better.
Spring has come, at last, to Kansas. It is the season of expectations, and it gladdens the heart with renewal and hope. Man has always hungered for change, and Americans, more than anyone else, are an optimistic people convinced that they can prevail. The Reverend W.C. Tillman.
We would like to hope that this spring will bring on new beginning, a new era of satisfying the blacks in key positions. But will it? I hope. I do hope.
The road might get rough, and the going might get tough, but I can see hallelujah in behind.
Congressman Dan Glickman.
Even with economic despair, they tend to go back out there and I think portray a sense of not only optimism, but a sense that they're masters of their own destiny. At least they're in control, they're in charge. And that's a pretty heartening force in a world where a lot of other people and a lot of other occupations don't feel that they're in control.
Jim Harris.
Yeah. There's always some hope there, and there's always opportunity. America's a land of opportunity. You have to make of that what you will. I think America has great assets. America has people, it has resources, it has the abilities, it has time, it has wealth, it has resources which many countries don't have. We have the abilities, we have the assets, the capabilities, the resources. If we utilize those, we can.
This is the coast of Maine as few tourists ever see it. The winter is nearly past, leaving in its wake an ash-gray sky brooding over a leaden sea. The season of tour boats and day sailors is still far off. This is urchin diving season in Maine.
There's a 40-foot crack right there. You want to work east from that, you'll be all set.
The water is 33 degrees on this raw day in March. For divers like Lucky Pedicano, the hardest moment is the first one, the decision to take that first frigid plunge.
The first 15 seconds that you hit the water, it's like jumping into a freezer. Even with a dry suit on and around your face, it's just like, I can't even describe the feeling. It's cold. Yeah, I like to get geared up when I get there quick, because if I sit around, I won't go.
Donnie Freeman has been diving for sea urchins for 2 years.
After you go over the edge, you know, when you get in the water, it's kind of like flying. I like it. I mean, if it was warm.
Under the water, the divers are buffeted by tides and swells as they dig the spiny urchins out of their hiding places on the sea floor.
The urchins hang around different boulders and in cracks, and you have to dig them out. And they try and camouflage themselves with shells and seaweed, and you just have to know where to look, I guess.
Actually, it's quite easy. It's real monotonous, just the same thing over and over again all day long.
Up on the surface, Robert Burnett collects and sorts the urchins while making sure his divers are safe.
Like I tend to Rob, he earns his money. There's been days that it's been, 5, 10 degrees on the surface. Of course, it's 30 where we are, 33, 35, so on those days, I'd rather be me than him.
There it is, green gold. That, the Japanese call that uni.
Robert Burnett never dreamed that the little green creatures that used to foul his lobster traps would be more valuable one day than lobsters themselves.
Years ago, when I was hauling traps, before there ever was a market for them, we used to save them up at the end of the day and kill as many as we could. We despised them. Like diving in chop suey, isn't it?
These days, diving for urchins is one of the most lucrative and dangerous occupations in Maine.
I think Donnie's having a hard go of it too. He's moving around quite a bit.
Every year, there have been 3 or 4 drowning deaths among sea urchin divers. This year, there was only 1. Some say it's because of new safety rules. Others say it's just fate.
The most dangerous, this is going to have to be it. You're underwater and you're breathing air out of a tank that's so big, and then when it's gone, that's it. It takes a toll on you after a while, I think.
Robert Burnett believes that it was inexperience that caused the divers to die.
40.
They were lured in by the big money, and all they had to do was go up the road a little bit and buy the gear and jump in the water. And there's a little more to it than that.
You don't want to be on this one.
But Robert has a deep respect for the sea.
You never know. Even the most experienced diver could run into trouble. You never know what's going to happen.
Need a good song to get motivated, I guess. Holy cow.
Rock and roll music helps.
Just between tanks, you think of a good song, and then you carry that with you underwater, and it makes the time go by, because there's nobody to talk to. It's like solitary confinement. You see a few fish now and then, but they don't talk back, and they don't really stay around.
At the end of a long day, when the green gold is brought into the dock, the rewards of hours of hard work are toted up. The urchins are tested to see what percentage of eggs they contain, and that, in turn, determines the price. Lucky Pedisano was happy enough. His urchins brought about $1,000. Not bad for the end of the season.
What?
The sea urchins will be processed in New England and sent to Japan, where they are a great delicacy. You would eat that, really?
Yes,
Let's give her a try. Let me see.
There's five individual slices, just like an orange.
Yep. Yep.
And this.
Yep.
Well, that's a little big.
That is good.
I'll eat part of it.
Part of it. Mmm.
Not bad.
No thanks. No thanks. Tomorrow they'll go out again if the weather permits, out to test their will and their strength in the cold, gray waters off the Maine coast.
150 years ago, young men set forth from the coast of Maine on whaling ships. It was dangerous work, but you could make a good living at it if you were tough enough. Today, they're harvesting sea urchins off the sea floor. It's still dangerous work, and you can still make a good living at it if you're tough enough.
Despite threats by feuding owners and players that there might be no baseball this year, players sprouted on green fields once again this spring, as surely as the crocus and the dandelion. World wars never stopped baseball. Spring training is a kind of dream world. of players slowly reawakening to baseball, where this sort of thing passes for exercise, and players knock off for the day around noon. It's a time of hope and opportunity for players trying to hit it big and make the major leagues. Ed Noddle, manager of the minor league Pawtucket Red Sox, has been coming to spring training for 30 years.
Anybody that's in professional sports, not trying to make it to the top, might as well get the hell out because he's stupid. There's no money down here.
So you're trying to make the majors too?
Period.
Everybody down here is trying to break into the majors.
What are you doing down here at spring training?
Well, we supply all the major league teams with sunflower seeds.
Sunflower seeds?
Sunflower seeds, yeah. The ball players are going away from the chewing tobacco and are looking for something else to substitute that.
Even the umpires are trying to make it to the major league.
Now, do you practice at home?
In my bedroom or down in my rec room, I do practice, you know, and try to get my style down. Mechanics.
You got a wife and 3 kids. What do they think when you're in there practicing, yelling?
I think I'm nuts.
Spring training is a chance for fans to see their heroes up close.
Third base coach.
It's an opportunity for a Connecticut restaurant owner to get some new autograph photos for his walls.
We go back a lot of years when he was in Bristol.
What's spring training all about?
Well, if you haven't had a chance to have a cold beer over the winter, it lets you get back in practice for that.
At spring training, Ed Noddle also brushes up on his infamous lounge act.
Like a band of gypsies, we go down the highway. Actually, what happens is people hear me sing and they say, well, maybe he can manage. And then they watch me manage and say, maybe he can sing.
But baseball isn't all fun and games. Despite the seemingly relaxed atmosphere, there are goodly amounts of fierce competition and high anxiety here beneath the sunny skies and swaying palms. There are about 200 players here in Red Sox uniforms. 27 will go north. The stakes are enormous. The average annual salary in the major leagues is about $600,000. Some of the minor league players will make $850 a month. Others will have to turn in their Red Sox uniforms and go home without a job.
I think it's a tremendously competitive business, and you can't get it done unless you head south and play ball for a while.
Much of the attention is focused on the drama unfolding here at first base. There's a host of players vying for this position, ranging from young rookie sensation Carlos Quintana, eager for his chance, to the sentimental favorite, 40-year-old Bill Buckner, trying to stave off the end of his career. 21-year veteran Bill Buckner has more hits than any player in the major leagues today.
There you go, Billy. Good shot. Come on. Good wrap, Billy. Hoping to win it for New York.
Yet he is most remembered for one single error he made as the Red Sox first baseman,
Gets by Buckner, rounding third night.
letting the ball go through his legs to open the door for the New York Mets to win the 1986 World Series.
In stunned disbelief. A slow ground ball went right through the legs of Buckner down the right field line.
In the media, I think, got a little carried away, and I don't believe that so much emphasis should have been put on that. I mean, I had a lot to do with getting us in the World Series. We got there together and we went down together. A few guys that would have liked to have things turned out a little different in the World Series, but you know, that's what makes it a game.
It does something to you mentally, Bill, but you just can't let it get to you.
Johnny Pesky knows just how Buckner feels. Pesky, a former Red Sox great, still suits up for spring training. But he was the shortstop blamed for holding the ball and allowing this key run to score in the Red Sox 1946 World Series loss to St. Louis.
Base at full speed, scoring all the way from first, when the relay throw from Johnny Pesky reached home too late for a play on Slaughter.
I've suffered through the years on that. People have accused me, and every once in a while you go into a supermarket and say, "You bum," and all that. But
That's 44 years ago, and they're still coming up to you in the supermarket.
I'd love to, for it to happen the other way, but it didn't happen that way, and I have to live with it.
With spring training just half as long this year because of the lockout, each error, each at-bat, takes on twice the significance. In this inter-squad game, Buckner faced a talented minor league pitcher, half his age, and just as determined to get Buckner out as Buckner was to get a hit. This day, youth won out. After Buckner grounded out, Billy Joe Robideau, one of Buckner's chief rivals for the first base job, came to bat and hit a home run.
Get over somebody's head. Get over the fence.
I think Billy Joe Robideau probably has the inside track if they're looking for a first baseman and left-handed bat. If they're looking for just a left-handed bat, then I think Bill Buckner's got a good chance. He has problems with running, but he can still swing a bat. He's having a fine spring.
You know, all my kids, my oldest daughter's just starting to realize, she's kind of been a motivating factor for me too. She really wants me to play another year. She kind of likes the fact that her daddy's a big league ball player.
In the end, all of Bill Buckner's hard work paid off. He'll be in a Red Sox uniform tomorrow on opening day in Boston.
Surrounded by tulips, as we are every spring, we may take them for granted. But tulips were once more valued than diamonds. A man's wealth was rated by how many tulips he owned. And just one tulip bulb would constitute a formidable dowry for his daughter.
In modern-day terms, you must be looking at least $500,000 for a single tulip bulb. There we go.
British gardening expert Anna Pavord is the author of The Tulip, the story of a flower that has made men mad.
It's the most subtle, it's the most mysterious, it's the most intriguing, it's the sexiest flower on earth.
She's organized a celebration of the tulip at the Chicago Botanic Garden called Tulipmania, which sports not just live flowers, but all things tulip.
I mean, I would die to have that in my garden. Come back, beautiful tulip with a blue base, please, I need you. People think that it's a Dutch flower, but of course it's not.
Researching her book for 8 years, Anna discovered that this is a flower with a history.
Their homeland is way over in Central Asia, an extraordinary place where 4 countries meet: Mongolia, China, Kazakhstan, and Russia.
It worked its way westward to Turkey, where it became the passion of the royal court.
We had a sultan then, Mehmed III, who was so mad about tulips that every single night during the flowering season, he held tulip parties. Here is this woman dancing with all her veils amongst the tulip flowers. It's just a sort of evocation of how extraordinary those tulip parties must have been.
In the late 16th century, the flower arrived in Europe as the tulip.
The tulip's greatest adventure happened in the Netherlands. The Netherlands didn't get the bulb first. When they got it, boy.
It wasn't long before the Dutch were in the throes of full-blown tulip mania.
People were exchanging one single tulip bulb for the price of a fine townhouse on the side of the Herengracht, the best canal in Amsterdam, because tulipomania was the first great speculative financial gamble. The whole concept of futures trading was actually built round the tulip bulb.
10-7!
Long before there were pork bellies and corn futures, investors were betting their fortunes on tulip bulbs.
At the height of tulipomania, people actually would get Jan Bruegel, Jan van Huysum, the great Dutch flower painters, in to paint them a flower piece like this because they couldn't afford the real bulbs.
Elsewhere, people were going bonkers for bulbs as well.
In the court of Louis XIV, when women went to court, what did they pin on the front of their bodice here? Not their biggest sapphire, not their biggest ruby, emerald, or diamond. They pinned one single tulip. The ultimate status symbol, the definitive emblem of what you were worth in 17th century Europe.
Tulips were so beloved that the early Dutch immigrants brought them to the New World.
I mean, don't you find that incredibly touching? Here they were, these guys, dying of famine, dying of starvation, and yet what they wanted with them were the flowers that actually reminded them of home.
Anna misses her tulips when she's away, too. Her garden back in England bursts with over 2,000 blooms.
Hot, 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 dry, 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 dry.
Which is one reason why she's never shy about volunteering tulip tips.
I think the problem with tulips in this country is that far too many of you irrigate. I was staggered and horrified to see people using sprinklers even in April. I mean, you know, this is crazy.
And if Anna sounds tough on gardeners, listen to her badmouth other flowers.
I say blow roses. I mean, what do they do for you but sit there as a bunch of dry sticks for most of the year? I mean, and red roses, they don't even have any smell anymore.
Anna Pavord is a woman in love, and she hopes we will be too.
I never knew that flower had so much going on in its heart and in its soul.
It's a magnificent migration that's still a mystery of science. Clouds of orange wash over the forest canopy as hundreds of millions of monarch butterflies from as far away as Maine, North Dakota, even Canada, fill the skies here in Mexico. Each weighs just 1/5 of a penny, but so many flapping wings sound like falling rain.
You've been out here countless times. Does it still have an impact?
Absolutely. I stood in this forest the other day filming, and I started to cry while I was filming, and that's after 23 years of coming and watching it.
Veteran conservationist Bill Toone was part of the team that saved the California condor. Now he's turned his attention here to a site that's both awesome and troubling.
These butterflies are our canary in this coal mine.
There are an estimated 250 million monarch butterflies that winter in this preserve. That sounds like a lot. It certainly looks like a lot. But imagine 15 years ago, there were nearly 1 billion. Because these giant fir trees, which act as a sort of winter blanket for the monarchs, are being chopped down. The butterflies cling to these oyamel firs for warmth. Without them, millions can freeze to death. This year, bad weather killed more than half of the butterflies here and drove the living deeper into the dwindling forest. The Mexican government set aside about 140,000 acres as a protected zone for the monarch butterflies. Still inside this zone every year, more than 100,000 trees are cut down. Mexico lost nearly 7% of its forests between 1990 and 2005. That's an area twice the size of New Jersey. How bad is the illegal logging around here? There is a lot of it. It cannot be controlled, Marino Chavez tells me. Still, he joins other ordinary citizens patrolling the woods to report illegal loggers. When you're out trying to protect these forests, are you thinking about these guys, the younger generation? Yes, he says, if I didn't help protect the forest today, they'll have nothing tomorrow. But even today, deforestation threatens more than the butterflies. It destroys watersheds, which can contribute to deadly mudslides. This one, just 5 miles from the butterfly zone, killed 17 people back in February.
The best theories we have say that the decline in the monarch butterfly populations are associated with forest loss and forest damage. And a good forest damage comes from people just cooking their meals or trying to keep their families warm.
The average family in this part of Mexico consumes the wood of 40 trees a year. So Bill Toone's group, EcoLife, is building and donating these fuel-efficient stoves, which they say can cut consumption more than 60% to just 14 trees a year.
Hola, Estela. ¿Cómo estás?
Toone and his colleague, Christine Anderson, check to see how folks like Elvira Delarde are using their new stoves. With up to 17 mouths to feed at home, Delarde's priority is not protecting the monarchs. The wood we collect will last longer, she tells me. Now that this family is using this fuel-efficient stove, they say this is enough fuel to last them for 2 years. Before, it would have only been enough for 6 months. Though the plaque reads friend of the monarchs, Ecolife now stresses the stove's practicality and the health benefits to piping pollutants out.
The roof you see in here is a really great example of what her lungs look like after spending a lifetime of cooking. It's the equivalent of 5 packages of cigarettes a day.
Ecolife is also pledged to plant 1 million new trees over the next 3 years. And just last month, California's EPA announced a woodland restoration partnership with its Mexican counterpart. Ricardo Martinez is a deputy secretary at the California EPA.
The monarchs are internationally important between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. It's something that we have to work together to protect.
After all, the migration spans all 3 countries.
The monarch has the most fantastic migration of any insect in the world. The butterflies that fly here have never been here before.
Lincoln Brower, the world's leading monarch expert, says this magnificent migration is worth saving.
How would the world be different without this phenomenal migration?
Well, my answer to that is, what good is the Mona Lisa? What good is Mozart's music? We could live without it, but we would be diminished as a culture and as a people. There's nothing like it. It's unique.
This is a story about gardens. The gardens of Charleston, South Carolina. At their glorious, voluptuous, luxurious spring best. Looking like Southern belles in their most colorful party dresses, showing off. But there is more to it than that. Specifically, this is a story about Mrs. Emily Whaley's Charleston garden at the far end of Church Street, and the memoir inspired by it.
It's small, only 30 feet wide, and tucked away in my backyard, but a great many visitors come, especially in the spring.
There are 5 distinct gardens. It's a composition within a garden. So if you step in the...
Mrs. Whaley's garden has been on the Historic Charleston Foundation's annual spring tour of houses and gardens 35 out of the 50 years the tour has taken place.
Charleston, I assume everybody and their knows about Charleston. The Civil War started in the city's harbor, which is only a block over from our house. You won't hear about that from me, though.
It was her plantation-bred mother who passed on the notion that a garden is a life's work, an expensive one. Mrs. Whaley writes that one successful way to finance a garden is to choose carefully whom you marry. A good and generous man is needed. She married lawyer Ben Scott Whaley.
I don't spend on a lot of things just because I don't buy a racehorse. I don't buy diamonds. There are lots of things I don't buy just because they don't interest me. I'd rather spend the money on this kind of thing, and I don't really concern me.
Her garden was created in 1940, 57 years ago. Right from the start, Emily Whaley knew it would play a central role in her life.
Absolutely.
You knew from the very beginning.
It did with my mother, it did with her sisters, it did with her mother, it did with her grandmother. It has been a thing in our family. The women garden and show off their gardens the same way that I show off mine. If somebody says, come with me and show me your garden, I said, ooh, will I do it? I'd love it.
I understand you educated Bill.
Educated Bill, yes. He did not know a pine tree from a violet when I took him under my charge. I'm not kidding you either. That's not an exaggeration.
That is the truth, absolutely.
But Bill Baldwin, the writer commissioned to help Mrs. Whaley with her book, did know something about Southern storytelling.
Is it all you telling stories, or did he tell some
There was the
stories?
story about why tulips are a luxury.
It's like a chocolate cake. You eat it once. It's like a wedding dress. You wear a wedding dress once, you plant tulips once, and it's over.
What does that say to you?
It says to me that this is a woman with an incredible sense of language.
In the gardening glossary section of the book, Mrs. Whaley says about color. Even though Monet used red successfully in his color schemes, and even though men count on red roses to facilitate their communication with women, from proposals to apologies, I still think red is a difficult color. A good blue could fix anything.
A few of those branches that need coming off or trimming up a bit.
And on the subject of pruning, she writes, there are two kinds of people in the world. One kind loves to prune, and the other kind doesn't. Mrs. Whaley prunes, as does her longtime gardener, Junior Robinson.
This is temporary. This is temporary, though.
He moves around in a full flower border like a cat, never disturbing a plant. It is a feat, a gift from heaven, and almost as rare an accomplishment as a lovely, trained singing voice.
Bill Baldwin says Emily Whaley's garden is a metaphor for life, a portrait of its owner. Charleston is a gallery of such portraits, with strong family likenesses.
And it goes back even to 1680. As soon as they're off the boat, you read the letters, and they're asking for seeds from home, you know, flower seeds. And so I've always thought just that was sort of a key, that even there, that these people are trying to connect back to England, homesickness in a way, and just creating something sort of civilized and orderly and comfortable.
A look Mrs. Whaley achieves with utter ruthlessness toward any plant that doesn't measure up.
There's no use to leave it here, floundering, looking sad, sick. It takes away from everything in the area. And I have failed, and though I've tried everything.
So you just rip it out?
Yeah, rip it out. I'm unsteady on that.
After 2 years working with Mrs. Whaley on the book, Bill Baldwin had a confession, what he learned from her.
I've never looked at flowers before. I actually get up close to them and look down in them. There's all sorts of strange business, you know, down inside of flowers. And, the light. But I'm starting to think that I actually came out better than Emily, you know, as far as just appreciating life, and all she gets is a book.
Ah, but she has her garden.
I might be particularly enjoying the breeze on the back of my neck, or I might feel that I'm more a part of the scheme of all of this, that those birds are not, they don't make plans, these trees, they don't make plans, and that when I'm here, I don't need to make plans either.
In her memoir, Mrs. Whaley calls her garden a place to invite your soul for a visit.
Japan turns pink this time of year as its cherry trees bloom. A simple stroll through the park becomes almost magical under a canopy of blossoms. It's as though the selfie stick was invented for such occasions.
The way the branches are spread out, how the blossoms are laid out, all of those little details delight the Japanese.
Journalist Kaori Shoji writes about the Japanese fascination with this flowering tree.
The very first word that we learn in first grade is sakura, the 3 characters that mean cherry blossoms.
With all this pink, businesses see green. There are cherry blossom bath salts and cosmetics, tie clips and cufflinks. Cherry branches are even used to make other items more appealing, say a toaster. There is a business side to these cherry blossoms.
Oh, absolutely. There are countless food products made from these petals. There are sake made from these petals. They would print it on kimonos. It's a marketing winner that no one even has to think about.
At this high-end cafe, we found cherry blossom desserts on the menu. Chef Takayoshi Watari carefully crafted a blossom-shaped confection. We treasure things like this that are fleeting, he said. The ritual of experiencing, even tasting the seasons is important to us. The Japanese famously gave thousands of cherry trees as a gift to America in 1912, helping then First Lady Helen Taft plant a public park in Washington, D.C. In Japan, it's said the blossoms embody the samurai spirit, evoking the image of warriors who believed their time on Earth was brief and should be glorious. These cherry blossoms have become a top tourist attraction in Japan each spring, and record numbers of tourists are expected to turn out this year, thanks in part to the weakened Japanese yen, which is making travel here more affordable. Hotels are booked solid, but you've got to look quick. These blossoms vanish in a matter of days. It's estimated 350,000 Chinese will travel to neighboring Japan during this peak blossom period and spend $1.1 billion. But the Japanese way of taking this in is free, except for the price of a tarp and some sushi. This beer and sake-fueled flower fest can get surprisingly rowdy. Though this is Japan and manners are important, shoes are off, placed to one side. These girls told us the flowers only bloom for a week, so the feeling is, let's party. Darkness does not mean an end to the viewing bonanza. Arigato. For about $15, there's a nighttime sakura bus tour. Companies may cash in on these blooms, but seeing them in public is free. And witnessing their fleeting beauty is priceless.
This week, the flowers at Rogers Gardens in Newport Beach, California, are in full, dazzling bloom. It's as if to remind us that even in the middle of our upended lives, spring somehow arrived on time. But these days, it's only the bees seem to be interested in flowers. Right now, nurseries like this one are selling out of vegetables.
What do you got there?
I got tomato plants, heirlooms, black zebra.
After weeks of seeing empty grocery store shelves, home gardeners are snapping up everything from lettuce to lemon trees, says Rogers General Manager Ron Vanderhoff.
But what are customers buying?
Things that relate to food. They don't want to go out in public, but they also want the safety and security of a nutritious food. And no better way to do that than to grow your own. Nothing's better than going out to your garden and picking a tomato off the vine.
Maybe try onions if you can find them from seed.
And now it seems gardening how-to videos are, forgive me, sprouting up everywhere.
Stop panicking, stop overbuying the toilet paper, and get out and start a garden. Pick a spot tonight, pick a spot.
Grow-it-yourself food, you might say, is suddenly just the thing.
People here say seed sales have doubled, maybe even tripled. And it might surprise you that tomato plants are going at the rate of 800 a day. What's not so surprising, and certainly not new, is the notion of growing your own food when times get tough.
It all started back in 1917, when the government called on people to grow war gardens to free up food for soldiers fighting overseas in World War I. And by the 1940s, same idea, different name.
Victory Garden. That's the answer. We can grow food for victory in our own backyards.
And grow they did in every available patch of land, even in the shadow of New York's Chrysler Building. All told, an estimated 20 million World War II Victory Gardens produced nearly 40% of the nation's fruits and vegetables. The goals today aren't quite as ambitious, but having a home garden still beats another trip to the grocery store.
Are you guys spending more time out here in the garden?
Well, we definitely have a lot more time to be in the garden.
Christina Nylander is a pediatrician who thought planting veggies might get her 2 kids to eat more of them. But in the end, it's not just about the food. With all the watering and the weeding, your own COVID-19 victory garden can produce what might be the most valuable commodity of all these days: escape.
It sounds like in this time of so much negative news, this could be one of the little positives to come out of it.
We want to be a happy place where we're providing food and a little bit of distraction, but we also want a person's garden to be their happy place, where they can do the same. So yeah, happy places are really important right now.
When I was about 10, I was sitting at the kitchen table eating a grapefruit half. I asked my mother where grapefruits come from. She said that the very seeds in the fruit I was eating at that moment could be planted and would grow into a grapefruit tree. Really, I asked? Really, she said. I know it's more complicated than that, but we weren't a farming family. So I spat a couple of the seeds into a jar of water. One sprouted, so we moved it into a pot with dirt. Time passed, and the plant struggled. A few times it almost died. And look at it now. Taking care of it these past 43 years has been kind of a hassle for my mother, but I'm just so happy it's still alive. Thanks, Ma. Happy spring.
It's happening, America. We've arrived at the absolute best day of the year. The day we spring ahead. I know you're probably still rubbing your eyes and wondering why this guy on TV is so happy about you losing an hour of sleep. Listen, you'll get it back. Just spend one less hour tonight scrolling through Facebook in bed, and look, you're all caught up. The return to daylight saving time, and by the way, there is no S at the end, which is the official name for what happens today, is a day to celebrate because it means we made it. We're survivors of those dark afternoons, those dark mornings, and those dark nights of the soul, thinking about how, well, dark it is outside. We made it through the worst of it, which for people like me with self-diagnosed seasonal affective disorder is actually a pretty big deal. Just the thought that each day for the next few months there will be more daylight, not less, is emotionally liberating. I stand, or, well, sit before you, a different Luke Burbank. Have I played even one moment of ultimate frisbee in my life? Absolutely not. Would I be there in a heartbeat if you invited me to play some at 6 p.m. tonight? You bet your sweet tookus. Today, everything feels like potential. A while back, Congress almost passed a law leaving us on daylight saving time all year round, meaning we'd never fall back again. Think about how good we'd all get at frisbee with that kind of extra daylight. I say we take it a step further. Pass a law next year that springs us ahead 3 hours. Yes, that first Sunday will be rough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But after that, all those warm spring nights when it wouldn't get dark until 11 p.m. or midnight, I mean, just the money we'd save on our lighting bills. But Luke, won't that mean sunrise won't be until 1 p.m.? Maybe. Look, I'm no Galileo. I honestly haven't thought this through very well. I'm just a guy brimming with excitement, sitting here in front of you on the best day of the year, hoping you'll invite me out to do something fun tonight. But not too late, because I'm taping 60 Minutes, and it's going to be a good one.